material. There's a gesture towards the object, a movement on the object, a motion with the material. There's a pulse, a rotating gaze, years of observing, black holes into a minute, final project, idiosyncratic. If I give it to you or you buy it from me, it doesn't make you a materialist. Materialism is an ugly word. Materials shaped by nimble and inspired hands, hands that know and never know is beauty. There's movement, there's an object, there's material, there's a gesture.
All right, so today we're going to do a coil pot. So we've already done coil bowl, so I think the best place to start is basically start with another coil bowl. We can keep it in something, maybe choose a smaller bowl to start with. It could be even a little bit smaller than this. This is like a mixing bowl. And I make my coil bowl just like I did before with the coils and the patterns, and do a lot of reinforcing, especially up here towards this initial rim, and make sure that we're sort of been smoothing as we're going and adding a little bit more clay to kind of make it a lot, structurally more sound. So if I pull it out, and I already kind of let it set up a bit, so it's getting a little stiffer, but still pretty damp. I can attach some clay to it, but it's going to hold its shape. So one of the first things I want to do is actually I'm going to put a little bit of a foot on it to kind of raise it up a little bit. As I work, and so I want to have my foot probably somewhere right in here, right where this transition is coming over before it sort of gets flat. So I just cut out kind of a thicker slab to make make it sort of sturdy, and I can kind of pinch it out a little bit as once I get it on there. So I'll just kind of eyeball it from the start, kind of figure out about where maybe I want to sort of cut it. So I'm going to cut that off, and then maybe just cut that and see how that is. And I'll cut 45s on these edges. Make sure it's sort of opposite. So we'll see. That looks like it's probably a little bit too big. So cut off a little bit more, right? And just sort of keep it maybe in there. I think that could be okay, but I kind of want to cut off bit more. So as it comes around, kind of want to see, okay, it looks kind of heavy right now, so maybe we will cut off a little bit more. So as it comes around here, we've got these two 45s that meet. It's kind of what we call a scarfing joint in carpentry, and well, in clay I guess we'll call it a scarfing joint also. So I will score it up, both these two sides here, right where they're going to meet. Give it a dab of water here. Make sure that when we kind of get that sort of compression, some moisture there, we kind of get it to sort of suction up basically, and sort of smooth it over a little bit, make sure it's connected pretty well. And then I'll just kind of make sure it's a little bit more on the round side before I attach it, and kind of center it on my piece here a little bit, and then just take my little paper clip here and kind of draw a line, and that's the interior part. So I'm going to want to make sure that I score pretty well outside of that line. Maybe I need to actually bring that over a bit, but Kind of score that. Get a little water on there. Then I'll score this up. Basically, this scoring and then adding the water, we kind of call it scoring and slipping. I'm not really using slip, I'm just using some water, but as I put the water on top of the surface here, it will, start to basically create a slurry, which really is a slip, which is just kind of liquid clay. So it starts to kind of grab and mix that, so it creates a little bit of a slurry there. And then I'm just going to, make sure that looks somewhat centered before I fully commit to it. Kind of push down on it, right? Make sure that I'm sort of suctioning here. And then I want to make sure that seam is good. And then I just kind of want to maybe pinch down. Make sure that this is sort of getting attached really well. Sort of push that down top of that scoring mark, and I should be able to see a little bit of water sort of actually squeeze out, and I know that I've got a decent amount. I don't want to have too much. And then I can think about what I might want that to look like, as far as taking something that's round, anything, and sort of creating a little design there. And then I'm actually kind of pushing it down, and I know it's going to sort of attach, give it a little interesting texture right there. I'll try to see if I can't repeat that later in the piece, so we have some continuity and sort of design, and sort of repeats itself as it moves up. So make sure I use the same nice little tool to do such a thing. So then I feel pretty confident about it being attached. Now I want to kind of thin this out, and I want to sort of bring it out a little bit, so I will pinch as I sort of turn it around. So you get to flare out a little bit, maybe not look so heavy, but also have a little bit more of a structure so it can sit a little bit better. And then always, just to be sure, it's always good to maybe make a very small little coil to kind of reinforce between the bottom of the bowl and that foot ring that I just put on there. And I'm going to push it down as I move along, so it sort of stretches out and stretches in to the foot ring and the bottom, so that coil sort of touching both. And then I can kind of really make sure it gets smoothed up into the foot ring and smoothed along this bottom. So it's really attached. So it's actually like a bracket between this foot ring and the bottom there. Okay, so I can kind of play with that later. So that will just make sure it's sort of straight. So now I want to start building up from this. So I want to come up, and then I'll start thinking about coming in and maybe out and stuff like that. But first thing I did, this is set up, so this really needs to be scored pretty well. And I added an extra little sort of coil in here so that this has sort of been nicely reinforced, because I knew this is going to be the spot where I would start the next round of sort of coils going up. So I kind of like to, kind of basically put a whole bunch of little X's on this. And then I can just get a nice dab of water on there. And so always, kind of when you start and stop, you know, if you're making a coil bowl or a coil pot, you need to really, it's important to make sure that you score up and get wet the first spot as you build up, because otherwise you're not going to be able to do it. So I already made some coils that should be long enough to attach, so I just kind of lay that top of there. Coiling is basically the oldest, the real sort of building sort of technique as far as once you're getting bigger pots. And people today still do lots of coiling, because when you start getting onto a really large scale, coiling is actually, different sort of methods there is actually more efficient and faster than using a potter's wheel when you start getting on a really large scale. So a lot of large pots you see, they may add coils on there and then kind of throw it a little bit, but they're really adding sort of big coils. And the Korean ongi potters definitely are all traditionally using this sort of coiling method that is actually very fast and very efficient, and they're just turning it. So I'm just going to sort of right now make sure I push down and kind of smooth this first one on there onto this top here that I just scored up and got wet. So I really want to make sure that's going to attach. And so I'm kind of just pushing a little bit of clay down into the piece. And I really want to get this one on first, because I'm attaching it to something that's a little bit drier. So it's really important to just kind of make sure you get a little bit of clay pushing down there, and then I can be a little more confident that this part here is going to sort of stay attached, and then I can add my next coil, and that one should go on even sort of easier. And since it's fresh clay sort of right out of the bag, I feel like I can just put it down. The thing I can't do is I can't just lay these on there and think that they're going to sort of stay on there. You have to, at the very least, smooth one side. You can smooth both sides if you want to not have any coils exposed, but it's kind of fun once you get something sort of moving like this to start using coils to make pattern just like you did in the bowl. So we will continue that as we go up. So next row, what I want to do is actually put some of these coils that I already made and turn into my spirals and get a set around them, and then sort of fill in the gaps in between them with some straight little pieces that I also cut to the same height as the height of the spiral that I made. So once I sort of made some spirals, I rolled out some coils, made sure they're all about the same length, made my spirals so they're going to be this tall. So then I wanted to have these pieces here be about this tall and sort of add in there between them, because it'll be difficult. I can't just set that on there and think that thing's going to stay up there. So even though it's pretty fresh clay and it's soft, I'm going to need to get this to sort of stay a little bit better as I work. I'm going to need to get that wet too. So I'm going to look at where that's touching, and I'm going to just kind of mark, and it's kind of easy if you actually just dip your, whatever your scoring tool is, right in there and just kind of just hit it a little bit and kind of put that together. So I'll do a couple on the other side too, just to make sure that I can kind of have that piece sitting there while I set some other ones up. It gets a little bit wet, and then these will help that just stay there as I start working around. And so these next couple of pieces are going to go in somewhere like that. Maybe I'll just kind of see if I can't get them to stay. Just a second as I kind of lay this out. That should be sort of fine. So I'll just kind of mark that, mark that, mark those up. That's where I want it. And I'll fill in between them. Kind of better to do that sort of one at a time. So it looks like I'll need about 3 of these vertical coils to get between. And I'm going to slant them in off the bat so that once we get them around I can sort of get it sort of formed, fill in these gaps here and stuff, and then have something that is a little bit smaller as it comes up, and then I can kind of start bringing coils in to make a neck, which I can show you as we move on there too. So I know this is going to kind of stay for a little bit, so I will work on this one, score that up, make sure that gets a little more wet, and then take a piece here, kind of attach it there, and then we know it's going to be touching about there. So score that up, and then we should be able to get those to kind of stay there like that. And I'm just going to keep working, get this around, add a couple coils on top, and then start bringing it in like that. Okay, so I got this little piece on there, and I'm just going to push a little bit of that clay down. All right. Just kind of shove it. It's all fresh. I scored, slip this first piece because set up a bit. I'm basically just putting a smaller coil in length around, making sure. And if I feel like I need to add more clay in there, I can. So just take another one, and I can come up and just kind of go shorter. And that could be it. And actually now, you know, that I look at it, I'm thinking maybe I should need to start coming back out. And so then I just start putting on the outside edge here. All right. Just come along, kind of fit it so it's just slightly on the outside. Come, cut my little 45. Maybe put a little dab of water where it's going to join up there. Kind of clean up the outside part there. Have it just hanging just on the outside, and then push that little bit of clay down on top of that other one. And then now that we have this sort of lip coming out, later I'm going to want to, you know, take some sort of tool and smooth out this, because we're going to be able to see that. A lot of stuff on the inside is going to be sort of rough like this, but that'll be okay because no one's really going to see it. So again, take a little piece, kind of bring that slightly on the outside. It's a little short. Add a little bit to it. Make sure this is attached to itself pretty well, and just slightly out. And you know, I start thinking about the actual overall shape. You know, if it's got this sort of traditional vase shape where it sort of, you know, comes out, comes back in, and you know, like the Greeks at some point had kind of really started to think about that as the aesthetic, about how it should look and how the lip, you know, your eyes should be it should be wider than the foot, or as wide or wider than the foot. So there's imaginary lines that are sort of vertical, or they're sort of slanted down a little bit. So that's something to sort of think about where to stop and stuff. And you know, it's different from having a bottle shape that might come in real tight. So this is the part here that I kind of want to smooth. Maybe add a little bit of clay if I need to kind of fill in spots like that. I think it might be a little bit thin. A little bit of wet clay in there and smooth that in. Stuff like that. And then my last piece that I want to sort of go around, I'm going to try to make that one a little bit fatter, so I can kind of pinch it out a little bit and try to maybe mimic that sort of spot there. So get that sort of scarf joint sort of set up there, and then make sure it looks pretty decent. It's attached pretty well, and then bring that out. And then first I'll make sure I push down that clay. Make sure it's attached really well to that piece. Make sure it's sort of sitting on the outside of that other coil so it can flare out. And then, you know, later I can really work on smoothing the inside. Kind of finish. But I'll pinch this one to kind of thin it out a little bit and really get a little bit of that flare so it starts to pull out. And then I can kind of work on that and kind of get the shape. And then now maybe I want to mimic this foot here, right down in here. And so I'll take my same tool and sort of push down on it like I had done before. So we have that sort of repetition of pattern as we come around here. And just sort of work on that. And see if I like that, maybe I want to add more. Make sure that we are sort of in there. And you know, kind of push that out and kind of see. Then the last things I need to do is go all the way around and sort of overdo all this stuff. Okay, so one of the things that we want to make sure we do, and it's tedious, but I will go back through and I will run some kind of tool through all my little lines to kind of clean them up and kind of compress them. And sort of stick some of this stuff too to make it look nicer. And I could use that, or you know, maybe some other kind of little stick or something that has a small, nice little rounded end or something to go through and clean all that up. Now the other thing I want to talk about is real quick is that when you're working on this, like normally when I'd be working on this, I would want to have basically keep it in a bag. Large bag if I'm going sort of bigger here, to make sure that my bottom part isn't drying out a lot. So I might kind of keep it sort of wrapped, you know, like this as I'm sort of working on it and stuff like that. And then also maybe down here, depending if we got farther out or not, you might want to just have a little bit of newspaper to kind of wrap around and sort of create a little bit of support underneath that so that it doesn't sort of wobble too much while I'm working and maybe mess that up. And then when I put it away, I really want to maybe shove this bigger bag into that, kind of make sure to get rid of some of the air, and then you know, have a smaller bag that I can wrap like that, and I can keep that. And then even, you know, later I'll want to just drape this over to dry real slow. So those things that we need to think about as we're working on these kind of pieces. drying slowly.
There's material, there's a gesture towards the object, a movement on the object, a motion with the material. There's a pause,